Most people who want to write a novel will never finish it. And I know that sounds really harsh, but it's just a fact. I see this all the time in my work. But I don't think it's because they're lazy or because they don't have good ideas or because they're not talented enough. It's really got nothing to do with any of those things. I think it's because nobody really talks very honestly about what makes writing hard to stick to. Whether you're brand new or you've written multiple books, the same things tend to drag us all down. I still feel that way sometimes, and writing in one form or another is my job. You can't move for discussions about craft and structure and publishing and marketing out there, but there's really very little about how it feels to sit with an unfinished story in front of you and realise, with sadness, that you'll never reach the end of it. So that's what I want to talk about today. And if you watched my last video, we talked about why, which is the question I think writers can ask themselves to get at the root of why we want to write in the first place, but also why things happen in our books as well. But now, let's pick up from there and talk about quitting. Let's say you found your why, you've got that compass that I talked about, you're motivated, you sit down to write, and then at some point, a week later, a month later, maybe even a year later, you just stop. Yes, life can get in the way sometimes. Things happen, time gets eaten up, of course. But that's only really part of it. Even if that time you were going to write in gets taken from you, the desire to write should still be there beneath it, right? But somehow, no matter how dedicated you were feeling before, that can fade too. Why does that happen? I can give you a couple of thoughts on that because it's happened to me and it still does. The worst time though was a few years ago, just before I started making YouTube videos about writing. Back then, I'd just been booted by a literary agent that I'd had a kind of revise and resubmit deal with. I was working a dead-end job and I felt like I had no route forward whatsoever with writing. I came to a point where I either had to do something different and break my pattern of how I was approaching writing, or quit altogether and do what? I still don't know. I'm telling you this story because maybe it'll sound familiar, even if the details for you are a little bit different. So, why do writers quit? In my experience, usually comes down to one of three things. The first is isolation. Writing is a solitary pursuit, really, and that's part of what draws some people to it. I'm definitely one of those people. And I am generalising, of course, but writers tend to be reflective. They tend to be observers. And with writing, there's no need to be part of a team or organise this pursuit around other people's schedules. You do you, as they say, which makes it more accessible. But therein lies a trap that I fell into myself for sure. When nobody around you writes, and when no one in your life really gets how hard it actually is to do it well, we don't really have anywhere to vent when things get difficult. If you have nobody to tell you, hang in there, keep going, rejection is just part of the process, and other stuff like that, then you start to believe your own worst fears, or at least I did, that you're wasting your time and that this is never going to work out. I distinctly remember the moment I read that email from that agent saying, I don't think this is going to work out, good luck. I was walking into work at my old job first thing in the morning where I didn't want to be. Up until that point I'd been thinking, okay, with this R&R deal, I might be able to work towards getting published, and that might, down the road, lead me to being able to quit this job and do something more meaningful. Then I read that email, and I had nothing to do but go and sit at my desk and spend 8 hours doing a job I didn't want to do. And what could I say to anyone around me about why I was so quiet that day? Nothing. Because it would have seemed probably a bit ridiculous to them. So yeah, isolation, one of the biggest reasons writers quit. And I almost did. And then there's the absence of routine. This one's just as hard, but in a different way, I think. It's harder to catch this because there's no big moment of feeling something like isolation or frustration. With losing your routine or falling out of touch with it, it doesn't feel like quitting at first. You just miss a day, and then another. Then it's been 2 weeks, and you've forgotten where you were in the story exactly, and your foot's off the gas, and that makes it harder still to come back to. And I'm not saying you have to write absolutely every day. You don't. You have to find what works for you. But as much as motivation and inspiration can drive us to tell our stories, they are really just the starter motor of our writing strategy. They're what gets us going and creates that very first motion. No, I don't know anything about how engines function, so hopefully that analogy works. Once that initial motivation burns out or fades off, as it always tends to do, all you're left with is routine. Those days where you just make space for writing to happen. And those tend to make up the bulk of writing days, by all accounts. Motivation will always come back around. Inspiration can strike again. But routine is something that we can actually control, or something we have a much better chance at controlling, I think. The writers I know who actually finish things aren't necessarily more talented or more inspired than anyone else, but they are more determined. They know when it makes sense for them to sit down and do some writing, even if they don't feel like it. They've learned what works through trial and error, and they know when to avoid that ever-present urge to just step away and take a break from the story for a while. Building a consistent writing routine that you can realistically stick to can be the difference between 3 chapters of pure inspiration and then nothing, and a finished novel that starts with 3 really inspired chapters. There's one more thing I want to mention that can make a writer quit, and it's not knowing where the hell to go next. This can crop up in any story, no matter what your approach to planning or outlining is, or how motivated you are. You can still run into a dead end, or what feels like one, and with no clear way around it, that can cause everything to stall. That breaks the routine I just talked about, and then the problems start to compound. But even if that first draft gets finished, or the second or the third one, what then? We can find ourselves with no idea where to go, not just with our story, but our wider writing journey or trajectory. With no path in front of us, there's no clear way to go. And much of writing is incredibly uncertain. Will I finish this story often turns into, will I ever get published? And even that turns into, will I ever be published again? I felt that lack of direction sitting at my desk that day. The agent had given up on me, so I'd mentally given up on the book that I'd been working on. What was I supposed to do then? Going back and writing a brand new book felt impossible because I had no motivation or inspiration. I wasn't actively working on another book yet because all of my time had been spent revising this now pretty much dead one. And I couldn't tell anyone about all of that because they'd have been like, oh well, it's only a hobby. I'm sure you'll get another idea. So I ran into all 3 things that make writers quit all at once. In hindsight, I can see now that these issues weren't really writing issues at all. They weren't related to the craft or how good or bad of a writer I was. So I couldn't fix them by reading another craft book or watching an inspirational TED talk or finding that one missing piece that would make my dreams come true. That's not how it works. The problems that made me want to quit were about the world I'd crafted for myself as a writer, the corner I'd carved for myself. It was too isolated, too irregular, and too vague. What got me out of it was making YouTube videos, weirdly enough. It gave me a way to talk to other writers on a regular basis. It helped me stay consistent because I had to write to talk about writing, and it gave me a bigger goal, a reason to progress and get better at writing. It felt like I'd improved, if not eradicated, each of those 3 reasons that I'd previously felt like quitting, and that's really what you have to find. But talking to a camera on YouTube is not everyone's idea of a good time, I know. That's why I'm building something else for writers. I don't want you to feel like I did then, and honestly, still sometimes do a bit. I want to pull you out of that isolated writing room, help you build a routine that works for you, and give you a way to work towards your writing goals. It's coming soon, and it's called the First Draft Writers Club. On day 1, there'll be a full 30-day course ready to go, covering the foundations of fiction writing and building a writing routine that actually sticks, with exercises and resources designed to be genuinely useful in helping you discover what kind of writer you are. There'll be a community of other writers at the same stage as you that you can actually find and make connections with, which answers the first problem. The course itself, the daily structure of it, it's designed to help you build a writing habit from the ground up. That's the second one done. We'll make a meaningful start to a novel during those 30 days, and then after that, the big picture comes in. I'll keep adding content, more courses, mini courses, weekly live streams, videos that won't be on YouTube, and a writers group where you can get feedback on your work. I've already built character profiles, inspiration prompters, scene planners, a way to do writing sprints, and a load of other resources that you can download and use whenever you want and keep for life. The idea was to build something that supports you through your first draft and beyond, so you don't have to worry about that third problem, the lack of direction. We're all writing our own stories, but there's no reason we can't do it together. If that sounds like something you've been waiting for, there's a link below and a QR code on screen where you can sign up to be notified when it happens. I'm aiming to have it up and running in August, so there's not long to wait. I want to end on something that I think is important. Quitting, either for a week or a decade or whatever, doesn't make you a failed writer. It makes you a human being who found something difficult and ran out of support at the wrong moment. Last time we talked about the foundation of why you want to write. Keep that in mind, branch out, talk to other writers to beat that isolation, carve out a niche in your days where you can keep making progress and don't lose sight of that end goal. Above all else, keep writing. Thanks so much for watching.